Yes, it is.
Can you hear that? No. Okay. You all okay now? No. All right. Let's throw things away. Hello? Hello? Right. Okay. Right, welcome to the Planning Committee. Welcome members of the public. I don't think this is going to be a terribly long meeting, but we'll see. I'm Brad Morby, I'm Chair of the Planning Committee. On my left is Duncan Smith, who's the Chief Planning and Public Protection Officer. On his left is Richard Lewis, who's the Head of Development Management. And on his left is Paul Wielden, who's Transportation and Highways Officer. On my right is Rachel Beale, who's taking the minutes. And on her right is Tim James, who is the Assistant Chief Legal Officer. And a couple of officers here who, as and when they speak, will be introduced. First item is apologies for absence. Rachel?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Keith James.
Phil?
No, go on. I'll say what I got to when you go through the minutes.
So you haven't got any apologies to give? Okay. Next matter then is declarations of interest. Are there any interests members wish to declare? Tim has got some advice.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as usual, members, if you can remember to record the interests in the attendance register. The interests I'm aware of at the moment, Chair, all in relation to agenda item 5, the planning applications. Firstly, Councillor Parish, I think you wish to declare a personal but non-prejudicial interest in relation to applications 1 and 2, both concerning Abersucken, and application 4, Panteg, the reason being that you're a member of one of the consultees, being Pontypool Community Council. Is that correct, Councillor Parish?
That is correct.
Thank you. And Councillor Barry Taylor, I think you're in exactly the same position as Councillor Parish on those 3 applications. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. And then in relation to item, the third of the planning applications, rather the Blaenavon matter, I think both Councillors Stuart Evans and Councillor Alan Furser, you wish to declare personal but non-prejudicial interests as members of Pontypool Town Council who were consulted on that application. Is that correct, both of you?
Blaenavon Town Council.
Blaenavon, I beg your pardon. Yes, indeed. Wouldn't be
that is correct.
Otherwise. Okay, thank you very much. Not aware of any other declarations at the moment, Chair. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, if we can go forward then to item 3, which is the minutes of the Planning Committee held on the 12th of August. Are there any matters of accuracy which members wish to raise? Councillor Seaborn?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare that I did give my apologies for that meeting, but they are not recorded within the minutes.
Okay, we'll correct that. Councillor Furser?
Same for me, Chair. I was on holidays. I notified my holiday period, so that should be noted. Thank you.
Okay. Any other corrections to the minutes? You're happy that there are, subject to those additions, a true record?
Approve them, Chair.
Good. And are there any matters which members wish to raise in relation to the minutes? Okay, you ready to move on? Item 4 then is planning appeals. This is a report to note. Anything that officers wish to say in relation to it?
Could I just ask a question on that, please, Chair? As you can see, it's an appeal allowed. So we turned it down in the beginning, was it? So when it went to the Welsh office or to the appeal, how were they defining it for allowing it when you were turning it down? What was the difference? How come you turned it down and they allowed the appeal? It's one of these things, we see it sometimes. It's just a question I'd like to ask how the appeals were allowed, and when you were turning it down, if you can explain why you turned it down and they thought in the Welsh office it was to be allowed.
Sorry, before you... Ron, have you read the report? Because it gives the explanation.
I know it's in there, but sometimes with the officers, I mean, they give in decisions. But when it goes to appeal, I mean, sometimes we're always told not to turn anything down because when it goes to appeal. But it's just a question for the officers how they felt. Do you mean? It's coming off them, that's all.
Well, if you lose an appeal, you obviously feel as if you've been let down in a way. In this instance, this was for use of a non-industrial use within an industrial premises. And generally, the policy that we operate tries to protect industrial premises from non-industrial uses. There are other reasons for doing that as well. Those uses that could go into those premises could go into town centres, for example, where they're better located. In this instance, this was a gym on the Pontnewydd industrial estate, which I'm quite surprised actually that we lost the appeal because it was accepted that the demand on that estate was quite heavy. You know, there was turnover, but there wasn't a lot of vacancy. So to lose the appeal, I was rather concerned at the reasons. But you can't. Well, there was no reason for us to challenge the appeal, the appeal decision. In these sorts of areas where you are in objective country, so to speak, subjective rather than objective country, inspectors can sometimes come up with decisions that surprise you. And in this instance, I was surprised.
Thank you. That's all I want to know, Chair, how the officers felt, because they do a very good job, as we know, but then when it goes to appeal, and in the Welsh office, they overturn these officers, because with one chap in the doing the appeal, it's only one man's opinion, but with it's all officers, and you do the work all together, and you make the decision, and all of a sudden one man comes up and says, well, no, I disagree with that, so he will allow it, and that's why I want to know how you felt, because, I mean, you feel if you're doing the job right or not, and it is protecting these premises, as you said. Thanks for that, anyway.
I've got to add that largely our record is very good on appeal, and it's you know, we don't lose a lot of cases, and they're generally lost in areas where there's a subjective judgment to be made, and in this case, the inspector went against.
Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Chair. I'm carrying on in the same vein as Ron, really, and I tend to agree with what you said, Duncan, that we've been very successful with appeals in the past. Can I just ask, were there any costs awarded to us because of the success of the applicant?
No, this was dealt with by written representations, and in those cases there are no costs involved. So
thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Hello? Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay, I'll give it a little bit. Do you want me to repeat what I said? No. Fair enough, Councillor.
We will try and speak up. Okay, any other questions or comments in relation to that particular item? If not, we'll move on to the next item, which are the planning applications for consideration. Now, numbers 1 and 2 on the list are deferred for reasons which relate to matters outside, really, the control of the department, in as much as certain issues have been raised late on which can't be reflected in the report. So that will be dealt with and a full report can come to, hopefully, the next meeting of the Planning Committee. So the next one to deal with is item 3, and for this particular item, Duncan has to declare an interest as a close personal associate was involved in assisting with the application. So Richard will deal with this from in Duncan's absence, but we'll start off by asking Rebecca McAndrew to present, well, just say a few words, really, perhaps not a full presentation, say a few words about this particular report.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, we had a member site visit back last month or the end of July to this site. So all I was going to do this afternoon was just run through, because I think at the site visit we said that we were expecting amended plans in. So I was just going to run through what the amendments have been to the scheme since the previous scheme that we looked at on site. So as I said before, this at the site meeting, there's 10 dwellings on this site and the applicant's Mellin Homes. So there's 6 houses and 4 flats. This revised scheme that came in, the original scheme that came in, there was a footpath going right around this corner here, which would have involved the loss of a stone retaining wall on this prominent corner. So the applicants have revised the scheme to shorten that footpath to allow the retention of that wall, because we see this corner as quite an important area with views across from the ironworks. Also focusing on this corner, we've had improvements to the porch design on that side elevation because of those views, and we've negotiated the retention of one of the trees. The rest of the trees were already remaining, but that one was shown to come out to allow parking spaces to be provided there. So this current scheme relocates the parking spaces from this area down to this side of the site, allowing the retention of those trees. The objections that have been received, if I point you to page 40 of the report, we say that 2 letters have been received. It's actually 3 letters. All the objections contained within those letters and concerns raised are detailed in the report, but that should actually say 3, not 2. So since the agenda's been finalised and the report's gone to press, I've been in discussion with 2 residents of King Street, the lady from the end terrace here and somebody else here with that driveway. So we've been discussing and clarifying certain aspects of the scheme in terms of width of parking spaces, time lines for the development, when they'll start building, how long it will take. The applicant here was concerned about residents parking and blocking the driveway on the road. So we've discussed this with the Highways Department, and they're happy to attach a condition to any consent granted to have a slight build out of the pavement there to prevent that driveway being blocked. I also need to point you to page 41 of the report, just to clarify at the top that you may have noticed the numbering's wrong. So you go from 6 to 11, and that should have actually been 1 to 6. So they are the key points. So that's all I was going to say really today, because it's all in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to start off with for Rebecca or the officers? Councillor Evans?
It's not a question, Chair, it's a comment really. Obviously you're aware that we held a site meeting here to discuss the aspects of the development. There has been a couple of issues there, as Rebecca knows, and Mellon's worked very hard with the planning department to try to eradicate those problems, one of them being the rights of way that came in very late in the day. But by and large, I think it's a sensitive development, and I take note of what you were saying about the enhancement of the corner, which is very important in the street scene. And I'm happy with the development, and I would propose that we support the officer's recommendation.
Okay, anybody else want to comment before we get into proposals? Nope. You're happy then to go into the process of making a decision? In which case, Stuart has proposed approval of the recommendation. That's seconded. You ready to vote? All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Right, the next application then is land at Foundry Cottages, Station Road, Griffithstown, Pontypool. We'll try and get Duncan back in for that one. Oh, yep, good idea. Yes. It's not intended to make a presentation or give an introduction in relation to this, unless you want some explanation from officers. So let's kick off then with questions. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. The one is from page 50, and it states that trees were removed without permission. Now, that's a concern for me, because obviously the applicant has cleared the site without going through the proper proceedings. And I'm going to tie this in with my second questions. If the trees were still in place, knowing that if we turn to page 74, it says the applicant, as submitted, is for a total of 31 dwellings. Concerns were expressed in relationship to the overdevelopment. If those trees were still in place, basically, would there still be an overdevelopment? Because in the report, it gives the impression that Torvine was against the overdevelopment, but they haven't given a number or expressed a figure in regarding what would be suitable. All they've just done is said basically they believe it's an overdevelopment, and the applicant refused to reduce its numbers accordingly.
Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the first question, there were several tree preservation orders on the site. We had an enforcement complaint about removals of trees. When the site was visited, majority of the trees, well, all the trees, with the exception of one, had been removed. The enforcement officer investigated at that time and looking at the history of the site. We did have a 2010 tree survey which stated that many of the trees that were actually removed, which was protected by the tree preservation order, were not in a good condition and weren't particularly suitable for retention at that time. So based on that evidence, the enforcement officer determined that it was not expedient to take any further action against the applicants. One tree was retained, which was the beech tree. That is protected by a tree preservation order. But in terms of the submission of this application, the applicant submitted a further climate inspection of that tree. That report recommended various works to stabilise the tree. However, our tree preservation officer stated that those works, given the type of tree it was and the condition it was in, it wouldn't tolerate those works very well and would decline. So on balance, we considered, as part of the application, to seek enhanced planting and tree replacement for the tree preservation, the trees covered by the tree preservation orders which were removed, and also we agreed the loss of the beech tree, provided that the replacement was provided within the site. So that the applicant has submitted a landscaping scheme showing the locations of the various trees. However, we have requested some further information via a condition in terms of the specifications of those trees. In terms of your second question, in terms of the overdevelopment, if the trees hadn't been removed, if they were considered to be suitable for retention now, which I would have doubted given that they weren't in very good condition in 2010, then the layout of the site would have to be changed dramatically to take into account those trees. And as a result of that changes, there would have been less houses on that site. But given the condition of the trees in the 2010 report, we felt that the best course of action would be to secure suitable replacements which would be able to grow and be integrated within the site.
And so are Torvines County Borough Council happy that there's 31 dwellings and there's no longer overdevelopment?
It is quite, it has got a high density, but given the location and the adjacent Churchwood site, we're satisfied that although it is a fairly high dense development, that there's no harm in this case. So we are satisfied, yeah.
Councillor Crick.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if you could elaborate on paragraph 7, page 78, about the parking spaces within the parking courts should not be dedicated to or sold with any particular dwelling. Is there going to be a covenant to that effect? Now, how long will this last?
This condition will stay on the planning application. It's something that they have to comply with. The applicant has stated that Seren, who the site's been developed for, who are registered social landlords, they are retaining control and management of those parking spaces. So this condition they'll have to comply with that indefinitely.
Okay, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I am concerned about the removal of the trees. And it's a dangerous precedent here, I think. I mean, Seren is a well-established social landlord, should be well aware of the TPOs on site, and I just got a real concern in this regard.
Councillor Parish.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, can I just ask about the highways issues? Access to the site is gained via the existing access road to the Pantig Industrial Estate off Station Road. Then it goes on to say the officer previously raised concerns in relation to the layout and the adequacy of parking. Then at the end of the paragraph, which is on page 73, it's got the Council Highways officer has withdrawn the objection and has accepted the reduced amount of parking in this instance. Can I have clarification of that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is an amended layout, and it has been amended from the actual previous layout. This one included a better layout of car parking than the previous one. It is in accordance with the County Surveyor Society standards. There is an element within the standards that allows you to reduce slightly parking provision. So there is a reduction in parking on this site. It's primarily two spaces per property. It is in line with the guidance. What we call it is a sustainability argument. If the developer can argue that there are facilities like health facilities and a small supermarket, for instance, and bus stops, and a shopping centre, post office, etc., within certain distances to the site, it does allow you to make a slight reduction in parking provision, which was the case in this instance. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Taylor?
Chair, I'm concerned as well as my other councillors about the cutting down of these trees, because it says that remaining protected trees were removed without permission. You know, to me, this is a developer running roughshod over the planning department and cutting these trees down. So I am concerned about this. Also, I'm concerned about the number of issues that have gone on within this report, and I think perhaps there should have been, or could there be, a full site meeting for members to see this if they wanted to.
Duncan?
Helen has given an explanation for the can you hear me? Yeah. Helen has given an explanation for the loss of the trees, and yes, I'd agree with, I think a member pointed out that this is Seren. They are a recognised local company. The agent is actually sat at the back there, so I'll make the point. This is not good practice. We looked at the tree report from 2010, and on the basis of that, considered that it was not expeditious, is the word as planners use, i.e. if we did proceed with action because of that report, it probably wouldn't get anywhere, so it would waste everybody's time. But it's not good practice. And, you know, for this to happen, it does happen occasionally. It's happened in the past 2 years on an application that's been before this committee, and it's not usually a housing association or whatever that would do this. So it's not good practice. But for the reasons I've pointed out, pursuing action on this particular site was not considered expeditious. In terms of considering the application, the officer has to make a balanced judgment on what's before them. There are issues of the development of the site, the number of houses on the site, the car parking arrangements, and particularly in this case, the site is adjacent to an industrial estate. So having a decent standoff from that was something that we were pressing for. And you'll see there's been 3 amended plans submitted in terms of this application. So you can imagine the first application was probably something that we would have, if it had remained, we would have brought here with a different recommendation. We felt we got to a point with the applicant where it was acceptable, and I use that term advisably acceptable, and we have to gauge in our minds that if it went to appeal, where we would stand. And we felt in this instance we couldn't push any further. I would like to push further, but I don't think we could in this instance in terms of that balance of judgment. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Crick?
Thank you. If we could go back to Duncan, perhaps. Are you really satisfied that the contamination issues are thoroughly dealt with here?
That's one issue I can say I'm satisfied on. There was an objection from NRW in terms of the application, and that's been covered. I'm satisfied that from that standpoint, that would not be a reason that I would say to members I was dissatisfied.
Anyone else wish to debate? Does anybody want to propose anything?
Chair, Chair, is there going to be a presentation, if you like?
No.
Because I did notice that there was an awful lot of slides now, if like that came up, if you like, and it was only by chance, because of the issues that were raised, that the selection of slides were given to the members to have a look at. There's no drawings in relationship to the 31 the development proposal, is it?
Is there anything specific that you think you ought to see? Having read the report, is there anything that you would wish to see a photograph of, or is there any particular purpose that you have in mind?
Well, there was only 10 developments on the last application, and we had a full presentation. It's like there are 31 developments being proposed here, and there's no presentation. That's my concern, is that for me, I've only got a written report. In an awful lot of circumstances, I think a presentation, especially when it comes to large-ish developments, it would benefit from a visual presentation as well.
Please.
Essentially, where we've got no speakers, we largely don't present the case to members. However, if in advance of committee a member feels a presentation ought to be given in terms of a specific application, we'll do it. We have got the slides, I think, Helen.
I would have thought that would have been the norm, though, Duncan, if like the fact that if there's slides available, we wouldn't necessarily have to ask for a presentation. They would automatically come to the planning committee for the members to view.
You've been a member of this committee now for quite some time, and it's quite usual for us to say we're not going to present on this particular item, and that includes items of this sort.
But the reason for that is because I didn't think if like there would be any slides to actually show. But obviously there is slides to show, in which case if there's slides to show, I would expect, if you like, the slides to be presented to the members of the planning committee.
Let's be clear that there are lots of different items which come to planning committee, some of which officers judge require a presentation in order to ensure that what might be a fairly complex report is understood by members, and many times that will be as a result of a discussion which I have with Duncan and Richard about the way in which the meeting is going to be conducted. And if I felt the presentation was particularly needed, then of course I would ask at that point. Likewise, as soon as you've got an idea of what's coming up, which presumably wouldn't be until after the agenda is released, then as Duncan says, it's quite possible for you to say, are we going to have a presentation? Because I think that would be helpful. The fact is you can't really blame officers for having evidence and material available in case you ask questions which require them to produce further evidence and information. That's their job. But it isn't a matter of routine for that to be presented automatically unless members request. Now, if you're requesting a look at particular aspects of this particular application, then there's not a problem that what is available can be shown. That's not an issue. What we're not going to do, though, is go to a point where we decide on the hoof that we will have in future presentations in respect of all agenda items, because that's not an efficient way of doing business. But if there's a particular problem or an issue which you feel hasn't been explained adequately and you think might be illustrated, then please ask. And I'm sure Helen will do her best to oblige.
I think that if like 93% of applications go to the planning department and the chief officer, if you like, and the team decide, if you like, to approve or not to approve. It's only, and this is my understanding, the confrontational ones, if like, or the ones with problems, that come to the, if like, the planning committee. And because you've only got a small selection, if like, for me, I would like to see a visual presentation in regarding what we potentially are going to agree.
Well, as I say, we're not going to change policy in relation to the way in which these meetings are conducted on the hoof. If that's something which you seriously think we ought to be doing, that automatically we should have a presentation on any matter which comes before this committee, and that isn't solely down to officers or the scheme of delegation. That may be simply on the basis that if Duncan is asked by a local member for a matter to come before the committee, rather than be dealt with under delegated powers, then nearly always Duncan will agree to that. And it will come before committee, even though it would be normally a routine thing. What I don't want to do is to find ourselves in a position where we are going against the scheme of delegation which the Council's agreed and dealing with matters which are not really sufficiently significant for, and the Council has decided this, for member involvement to be introduced into the decision-making process. That would go against Welsh Government policy as well. So if you're simply asking that anything which doesn't get dealt with by officers under delegated powers be subject of a presentation to the committee, then that's something that we'll debate at a future meeting, because I'm not going to agree that now, because all members are entitled to think about that and discuss that. I repeat this third time, really, Robert. If you have a particular issue you wish Helen to try and illustrate, then fine. That's not a problem. You're always entitled to ask for additional information. But that doesn't mean that we'll have presentations automatically.
I did have one issue, but that has been clarified by the slides, if like in relationship to the, if like the ground that was cleared and the removal of the trees. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Chair. Fallon, I mean, how many trees are retained on this site? I mean, there's the big beech tree down the back. There's the oak tree there. So the big tree down in the corner, that's got a TPO on it.
It's just the one on to the right of the large one on the right. That's the beech tree that I mentioned.
That one there?
That's the one that's had the climbing inspection, and that is to be removed, but we have a scheme for replacement.
Is it a beech or an oak?
Beech.
But I was looking at the back window of the back corner. I mean, if I was living down there, I'd be frightened. If you can see the big tree down there, that's still on site there. I mean, I honestly think that big tree down that corner, but the residents, see it right in the little...
They're actually within the garden of those properties.
Are they?
Yeah, and that's also protected.
In the size of that?
Yeah.
Dear, bless them.
Councillor Waith.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Can I just make a recommendation? I think we should approve this this recommendation with the 106 agreement, just to make progress.
I'll second that, Chair. I'll second that.
But there were others who had their hands raised asking to say something, including Councillor Taylor, I think.
Yes, it was only on page 50 where it says 1 and 2 foundry cottages, they were run down, but they were had both been demolished. Was there any historic interest in these cottages at all that we would have known about? Or were they just, non-interest to people?
No, they weren't of any historic interest. They were just semi-detached properties in poor condition. No, they weren't particularly. They weren't listed, and they weren't of any historic interest.
Okay, lovely.
Chair, this site was owned by the council. We're selling this to Saren, council property. So obviously, if there were any issues with those sorts of things, they would have been picked up before the demolition. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the recommendations, inclusive of the condition, particularly the one relating to Section 106? All those in favour, please show. That also is unanimous. Thank you. That concludes the planning business. The next meeting you'll see on your agenda is scheduled for 4 p.m. on Tuesday, the 14th of October. Just be advised that there is the possibility of industrial action on that day, which would potentially render it difficult, if not impossible, to hold the meeting on that day. So, obviously, as soon as we know whether that is the case or not, and whether it is possible to move the date of the meeting, then we'll be in touch. Thanks very much. Cheers.